It was just past 5 a.m. when the first patrol car rolled beneath the overpass. The city hadn't woken up yet, except for the dogs barking in the distance and the low hum of early commuters. Officer Jason Miller, 23 and barely a year on the force, sipped his lukewarm coffee and tried to stay alert. His partner, Sergeant Rick Bloom, a heavy-set man with a permanent sneer, tossed the half-burnt cigarette out the window and muttered something under his breath. "There he is again," Bloom said, pointing ahead. "Same damn bum every week." Jason leaned forward. A figure lay curled up near the concrete support beam, wrapped in layers of tattered blankets and garbage bags. One crutch rested beside him, and his right pant leg was empty from the knee down. The man didn't move as the car stopped. Bloom got out first, his boots echoing across the concrete. Jason followed reluctantly. "Get up, scumbag," Bloom snapped. The man didn't answer. "I said get up." Bloom kicked the side of the man's worn shoe. Slowly, the man stirred. He sat up with effort, blinking through a haze of sleep and grime. His face was leathery, weathered from years under open skies. A long scar ran from his temple down to his cheek. His beard was patchy, his lips cracked. "Name?" Bloom barked. The man looked at him, unfazed. Then softly, he said only 2 words. "Major Carlyle." Jason glanced at Bloom, confused. Carlyle? Was that his name? "I said your name, not some imaginary buddy," Bloom snapped. "Major Carlyle," he repeated, more like a prayer than a statement. "Oh great, we got a crazy vet again," Bloom muttered. Jason looked at the man more closely. Despite the filth, there was a stillness to him. Not drunkenness, not madness. Something else. "Maybe we should just let him be," Jason said quietly. Bloom turned on him. "Let him be. This is city property. He's trespassing, obstructing, and probably high on something. You wanna file the paperwork when he stabs a jogger next week?" Jason didn't answer. Bloom turned back to the man. "Last warning. Stand up." The man tried. He reached for his crutch but failed to grip it properly. He fell onto his side with a grunt. Bloom stepped forward and yanked him up by the collar. "You think you're better than us? You think you can sit here like royalty and mumble nonsense?" The man didn't fight back. He didn't speak. He just looked up at Bloom and said again, quieter this time. "Carlyle said don't shoot." Bloom shoved him back against the pillar. "That's it." He raised a hand and slapped the man hard across the face. Jason winced. "Hey," Jason said, stepping forward. "That's enough." Bloom turned toward him, eyes cold. "You wanna write me up for assault? Go ahead. But this waste of oxygen? He doesn't even exist in the system." Jason looked at the man's sunken eyes. The way his body trembled, not from fear but from cold and exhaustion. There was no aggression in him. No threat. Just silence. "Let's take him in," Bloom muttered. "Maybe jail will sober him up." Jason helped lift the man while Bloom grabbed the crutch. As they walked him to the car, Jason noticed a dog tag hanging around the man's neck. It was old, rusted but still legible. Roy A. Bennett. He whispered the name to himself. It meant nothing, not yet. But the man, barely conscious now, whispered again. "Carlyle, I told them not to shoot." Jason didn't know it then, but those words would haunt him for the rest of his life. The fluorescent lights of the precinct buzzed overhead, as Officer Jason Miller watched the homeless man slump silently onto the bench in the holding cell. His head hung low, his lips moving, barely audible. Jason could make out fragments. "Carlyle, not shoot," over and over like a broken record. He didn't fight. He didn't complain. He just sat there, as if waiting for something to end. Sergeant Bloom tossed the man's crutch into a corner and scribbled half-hearted notes into a report form. "No ID, no address, no pulse, practically," he muttered. Jason stepped closer to the bars. "Sir, can you hear me? What's your name?" No answer. "Carlyle." the man said again, eyes vacant. Jason turned to Bloom. Maybe we should check that name. Carlisle? Could be a missing person case, or Bloom scoffed. You really believe this nutjob knows a major? Jason, these guys say anything. Last week one claimed he was JFK's bodyguard. Week before that, said he trained Navy SEALs. Still, Jason looked at the man again. There was something about the way he said that name. Not like a lie, like it hurt. Bloom waved a hand dismissively. Fine. Waste your time. I'll go grab coffee. Jason sat at his desk and began typing into the system. Carlisle. Full name unknown. Military rank. Retired. Anything. After 20 minutes of dead ends, he added a filter. Military. Officer. U.S. Army. Retired. Possibly associated with Afghanistan or Iraq. One hit. Major Jonathan Carlisle. Silver Star recipient. Retired colonel. Last known address, rural Virginia. Phone disconnected. But there was a note in the file. Contact General Personnel Archives for verification. Jason leaned back. Could it really be him? He turned to look at the holding cell again. The man, Roy Bennett, as the dog tag had said, was now lying down, one hand curled under his head like a child. His breathing was shallow, chest rising and falling like a tired machine. Jason printed the Carlisle record and clipped it. Then he checked the military archives. Bennett wasn't listed. No active duty record, no discharge papers, nothing, just a name on a dog tag. Frustrated, he stepped back into the hallway and found Bloom scrolling through his phone. No records. Huh. Surprise, surprise, Bloom said. Jason ignored him. He pulled out his personal phone and searched Jonathan Carlisle Afghanistan online. There it was. An article from 12 years ago. Major Jonathan Carlisle led a unit ambush during a failed village extraction in Kandahar. 43 men surrounded. Minimal ammo. The report credited one sergeant with devising a distraction and saving them, but the name was redacted. Jason read the paragraph 3 times. That has to be him, Jason whispered. Who? Bloom snorted. Roy Bennett. Bloom laughed out loud. What? You think we just roughed up a war hero? Jason stood still. I think we did a lot worse. He printed the article and stuffed it in his jacket. As Bloom yawned and wandered off, Jason took one last look at the man in the cell. He's not just some guy under a bridge, Jason thought. He's someone we left behind. Later that night, Jason couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling in his apartment, the name Carlisle bouncing around in his brain like a ricochet bullet. It wasn't just the guilt. It was the mystery. Why would a man who saved so many disappear into the shadows? The next morning, Jason called the number listed under Carlisle's archived file. No answer. He tried the Department of Veterans Affairs. Dead end. Then he called in a favor, from his cousin, who worked in military logistics. After some begging and vague explanations, he got an address. A private care facility just outside Richmond. Jason requested time off. Bloom rolled his eyes. Hope your war buddy salutes you when you find him. Rookie. Jason drove 6 hours that day, not knowing what he was chasing. A name. A past. Or maybe, a part of himself that still believed in something greater than citations and quotas. As the sun dipped below the hills, he pulled up to the quiet facility. The nurse at the front desk hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, Major Carlisle is here, but he doesn't speak much anymore. Strokes. PTSD. We don't get visitors. Jason walked into the room, unsure what he would find. The man in the wheelchair stared out the window. His frame was thin. His medals lined the wall in a neat frame. Jason stepped closer. Sir, I'm Officer Jason Miller. I think I have someone you might know. He held up the dog tag. Roy A. Bennett. For the first time in what looked like years, the old soldier moved. His eyes blinked, then welled with tears. Roy, Carlisle whispered. He's alive? Jason nodded. Barely. But yes. Carlisle closed his eyes, and the single word he whispered was not a name, but a prayer. Thank God. Jason returned to the precinct with a storm in his chest. He wanted to scream, to shake Bloom, to throw the article in every officer's face, but instead, He walked quietly past the front desk and went straight to the holding cells. Roy was still there, curled into himself like a man made of paper. His face had darkened with bruises, one eye slightly swollen. The same whisper again. Carlisle. Carlisle. Jason crouched beside the bars. Roy. I saw him. Major Carlisle. He's alive. He remembers you. For the first time Roy's eyes truly focused. They locked onto Jason's, and for a moment they weren't vacant. They were full of fire, of 1,000 memories crashing back like a broken dam. Jason held up the article and slid it under the bars. Roy reached for it with shaking hands. His lips moved as he read. They never told anyone I made it, Roy said slowly. They left my name out on purpose. After what I did. Jason frowned. What do you mean? Roy didn't answer right away. He leaned back, eyes glistening. Then, finally, the words came. It was 2013, Kandahar province. We were ambushed, 40 of us, pinned down in a valley. I was recon. I was supposed to call for air support, but comms were dead. Carlisle was injured. Most of the unit was bleeding out, so I made a decision. Jason leaned closer. What did you do? Roy's hands clenched the metal bench beneath him. There was a village. Nearby. Civilians. They were shielding militants. We knew it. But there were kids. Women. I radioed the jets. I marked it. Told them it was hostile. Told them to strike. Jason felt a chill run down his back. And they did. Roy nodded. 2 minutes later, the sky opened up. We got out. 40 men walked away. But that village, it burned. Every roof. Every soul. Jason sat down. The silence was heavy. Does Carlisle know? Roy nodded. He begged me not to carry it. Said it was war. But I couldn't live with it. I left the army. Dropped everything. I didn't want medals. I didn't want a pension. I didn't want forgiveness. I just wanted to disappear. Jason swallowed. That's why you were under the bridge. Roy looked up. His voice steadier now. I thought I was punishing myself. But then, you picked me up. You looked me in the eye. First one in years. Jason sat for a while, letting the truth settle. You saved lives, Roy. You made a call none of us could imagine making. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it never will be. But this city needs to know who you are. Roy laughed once. Bitter and cracked. They don't want to know. They want simple heroes. Clean stories. You're wrong, Jason said. Standing. People need the truth. All of it. Roy reached out and gently touched Jason's wrist. Don't make me into something I'm not. Jason nodded slowly. I won't. But I also won't let them treat you like trash. He walked out. Straight to the captain's office. Captain Rhodes barely looked up. You better have a damn good reason for barging in, Miller. Jason dropped the printed article, the service records, and the handwritten note from Carlisle, onto the desk. This man is Roy Bennett. He saved Major Carlisle. He saved 40 American soldiers, and we beat him like a stray dog. Rhodes scanned the pages, his face tightening. Jesus. I want him out of that cell. I want charges dropped, and I want a statement issued today. Rhodes sighed. We'll need legal, and PR, and Bloom. He's going to fight it. Let him, Jason said. Or transfer me. There was a pause. Then Rhodes picked up the phone. Get me internal affairs. That night, the news broke. It wasn't dramatic, just a small local report. Homeless man identified as decorated war hero. A few blurry photos. A brief mention of misconduct under review. But within hours, it spread. By morning, national outlets were picking it up. Social media exploded with hashtags. A Roy Bennett had forgotten hero Sepbridge soldier. Veterans from across the country began sharing stories. Old squadmates remembered Roy. People posted photos from 10-20 years ago. Roy in uniform. Smiling. Full of life. Outside the precinct, flowers and notes began piling up. Jason found Roy in a hospital bed the next day. Clean clothes. Shaved. But pale and quiet. You started a storm. Roy said softly. Good. Jason replied. Let it rain. When the media storm became uncontrollable, the city council called an emergency press conference. The mayor, the police leadership, Even a congressman stood before the cameras trying to fix the situation. They all repeated the same words. Unfortunate misunderstanding. Heroic past. Unacceptable actions of a few officers. But in the eyes of the public, it was too late. Outside the hospital where Roy was recovering, people began to gather. With flags. With signs. With words of thanks. Some brought food. Others letters of apology. A woman in her 60s brought an old photo, her brother Jack standing next to a young Sergeant Bennett. She said Jack died the next day, but thanks to Roy, he had a chance to write his final letter home. Roy sat by the window, watching it all in silence. He didn't smile. He just placed the photo on the nightstand and closed his eyes. When Jason visited that evening, Roy asked, "What do you want from me, kid?" "Nothing," Jason said. "But I think people want to hear your story, the whole story." Roy was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "Then let them know everything." On the third day, Roy gave an interview. The camera was set up right in his hospital room. He spoke calmly, honestly, with no dramatics. He talked about the war, the decisions, the explosions, holding a boy with no face in his arms, begging God to let him die already. He talked about orders that went against his conscience, about Major Carlisle's voice in the dark, almost dying for his men. And then he talked about the village. "I knew there were kids there. I knew, and I still pulled the trigger. Because if I didn't, we would have all died. But when I came back, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. There was nothing left in me." He looked straight into the camera. "I'm not a hero. I'm a reminder of the cost of every order." The video was seen by millions. Some cried, some wrote angry comments, others sent support, but everyone agreed on one thing. It was real. Meanwhile, the police tried to save face. Sergeant Bloom was suspended. An internal investigation began, but Jason could see it. Most were just waiting for it all to blow over. And that's when new information surfaced. Journalists uncovered documents from classified archives. The operation in that village had long been buried. Over 20 civilian casualties, some of them children. The press was divided. Some accused Bennett of war crimes. Others defended him as a man who had saved dozens of soldiers. Society split again. Jason sat by Roy's hospital bed when the old soldier learned about it. "So there's the truth," Roy muttered. "I can't control it." "No," Jason said, "but you didn't hide it, and that's more than most do." Roy smiled. A true smile. For the first time. "You're a strange cop, Jason, not like the rest of them." The next morning Jason woke up to a phone call. Roy died in the night. His heart, peacefully. In his sleep. The whole country knew within hours. People gathered outside the hospital again. This time with black ribbons. Veterans from all over the state came to say goodbye. Even Carlisle showed up. In plain clothes. With flowers. He quietly laid them on the blanket that covered Roy's body. 2 days later, they held a ceremony. Simple. No speeches from officials. Just a young man in uniform reading aloud. Roy Bennett, Sergeant, saved 43 lives. Lost himself, but found his honor. There were no military ranks on the headstone, just a single line. He made a choice, and carried it to the end. The world moved on. As it always does. News outlets shifted focus. The online debates quieted down. Another scandal. Another headline. But some names linger. Roy Bennett was one of them. Jason stood alone at the grave one overcast morning. A folded newspaper in his hand. The city had quietly renamed a small park near the river, Bennett Memorial Grounds. It wasn't a grand gesture. No speeches. Just a plaque with his name. And a bench facing the water. A place for silence. Jason read the last article aloud. Though there was no one to hear it now, but the trees. Veteran or war criminal? The headline asked. Was Roy Bennett a savior of his unit? Or a killer of innocence? The article went on to dissect every decision he'd made. Military analysts argued about protocol. Ethics professors weighed in. Social media had already decided. Split between outrage and reverence. But Jason lowered the paper and said softly, he was both. He remembered Roy's face. Worn, broken, but honest. Not hiding, not running, not begging for redemption, but not denying what happened either. That kind of truth was rare. Heavy. Later that week, Jason sat down at his desk in the precinct. A few other officers nodded to him. Awkwardly respectful now. Bloom was gone. Reassigned pending investigation. The captain didn't look him in the eye anymore. No one said anything. But they knew. Jason had made it harder to look away. On his lunch break, Jason opened an old folder he'd kept hidden in his drawer. Roy's file, not the official one. His own notes, statements, timelines, interviews, everything Roy had told him. He thought about writing a book, or a report, something more permanent. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe it was enough that someone knew. A few weeks later, he went back to the bridge, the spot where he first saw Roy, curled up on cold concrete, mumbling a name no one cared to hear. It looked different now. Cleaner. Someone had left flowers. A single military dog tag hung from the railing. Faded, rusted but still legible. Bennett. Roy AA, USMC. Jason stood there a long time. Then he took a deep breath and walked away. Not with closure but with clarity. Roy had been many things. A soldier. A killer. A savior. A ghost. But above all, he had been a man who didn't hide from what he'd done. And now, it wasn't about what the world thought of him. It was about what each person chose to see.